It's funny, when you look at a map, it is incredibly easy to just see these solid lines and borders and, well, you just assume you understand what's happening inside them.
Right. You see the country, you know the capital, maybe the language.
Yeah, exactly. You might even know the primary language people speak there. But then you zoom in, you zoom way, way in on the remote highlands of Vietnam and Laos. And suddenly, it's like the map doesn't tell the whole story at all.
No, it really doesn't.
Because beneath that dense jungle canopy, there's a whole different reality happening. It's this reality of profound, unshakable faith and honestly intense, life-altering secrecy. So welcome to the Missions Connect Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
On the Missions Connect app, we focus on the most unreached and most strategic prayer topics in cross-cultural missions. The Missions Connect app is a Bible-based and missions-focused devotional and prayer app, and it is a ministry of assistingtoobey.com. And our tagline is one we hold very close to our hearts. It's blessing the nations through prayer, knowledge, and obedience.
Which is really, the foundational core of what we do. It's about intentionally aligning our hearts and our minds with what God is doing globally.
Yeah.
Especially in the places that are, frankly, the absolute hardest to reach.
So true. And this deep dive is a tool specifically designed to prepare your mind and your heart for the content of the upcoming week in the weekly preview. We're looking right now at week 30, which that runs from July 20th through the 26th, 2026. Okay, let's unpack this. Our focus for this week is the remote highlands of Vietnam and Laos.
Right.
And in the weekly preview, we are going to be exploring three main pillars. First, there's the staggering logistical challenge of Bible translation for these remote hill tribes.
Which is huge.
Oh, massive.
Mm-hmm.
Second, the reality of the hidden church and the pastors sitting in prison cells as we literally speak. And third, the three massive interlocking spiritual strongholds that are actively resisting the gospel in this region.
It's a heavy reality to step into. I mean, there is no getting around that. But we do not step into it without hope. The weekly preview anchors this entire week in John 1, verse 5.
Okay, yeah.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And what's fascinating here is that this deep dive isn't fundamentally a story about hardship or restriction.
Right. It's not just doing in gloom.
Exactly. It is a story about a resilient light in Southeast Asia that absolutely refuses to be extinguished. The gospel is already there. The house churches are meeting in secret. The translators are working quietly. We are simply being invited to join them in that work through prayer.
Well, let's start at the very bedrock of that work.
Mm-hmm.
Because before a church can grow and before it can really weather the kind of intense storms we're going to talk about later, it needs a foundation.
Yep. The Bible.
Right. Which brings us to the immense challenge of Bible translation in these highlands.
Right. And to really grasp the mechanics of this challenge, you have to understand the sheer linguistic diversity of the highlands. I mean, Vietnam and Laos are home to dozens of ethnic minority communities. We are talking about distinct groups like the Hmong and the Khmu, and these communities speak languages that are entirely different from the national languages of Vietnamese or Lao.
And just to clarify for anyone who might not be familiar with linguistics in this region, these aren't just like slightly different accents or local slang, right?
No, not at all.
We are talking about entirely different language families. Like if you only know a trade language like Vietnamese or Lao, which you might use at the market to buy goods, you don't necessarily dream in it or pray in it or understand complex theology in it.
Precisely. A trade language is transactional, right? But your heart language is relational. And even within those ethnic groups, the complexity just multiplies.
It gets crazier.
Oh, yeah. A staggering statistic from the weekly preview is that the Hmong people alone speak 15 distinct dialects.
Wait, 15? Just for one ethnic group?
15. And that doesn't just mean they pronounce things a little differently. It means the grammar, the syntax, the vocabulary shifts so much that 15 separate, entirely distinct translation projects are required to truly reach the Hmong people in their heart languages.
I am, struggling to wrap my head around the logistics of that. 15 distinct projects.
It is a monumental task. And look, progress is happening, but it's deeply uneven.
How so?
Well, for example, in January 2025, there was a huge milestone. The Lao Language Study Edition Bible was successfully launched.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
It is. But it took nearly a decade of intense, painstaking development. But, and this is a critical mechanism to understand, that edition primarily serves the Lao majority.
Got it.
Right. It does not serve the hill tribe peoples like the Khmu, who are spread across the highlands of Laos and northern Vietnam. For those tribes, literacy in the national language is often very limited, so they rely heavily on oral storytelling to even access the gospel.
Which leaves them incredibly vulnerable. Think of it like trying to assemble a complex, life-saving piece of medical equipment. But the instruction manual is only available in a language you just kind of understand.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. How vulnerable would you be to making a critical mistake?
Yeah.
If you only have oral stories passed down, or Bible in a trade language, your theology and your faith community are incredibly vulnerable to distortion over generations.
Absolutely.
But I have to push back on this strategy for a second. If these are highly restricted communist countries, and foreign translators cannot legally enter them on missionary visas, aren't foreign agencies putting these local believers in extreme life-altering danger by asking them to do this translation work?
Well,
Is having a Bible in a 15th dialect really worth a 9-year prison sentence for a local farmer?
see, that raises a really important question, and it is a tension that global translation organizations wrestle with constantly. But here is the reality on the ground. Foreign organizations like Wycliffe Associates, Wycliffe Bible Translators, and OMF International LIRV, they aren't coercing anyone.
Okay.
The demand is coming from the inside out. These local believers are literally begging for the tools to translate the Word of God for themselves. The agencies are just stepping in to provide the training and the software.
So the local believers are taking on the risk completely voluntarily.
Yes, 100%. They are operating under constant threat of government surveillance without any public recognition, working in total secrecy.
Wow.
And they do it because they understand the eternal weight of what they are handling. It brings to mind Isaiah 40, verse 8, "The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever."
Right.
To them, risking a decade in a terrestrial prison is a small price to pay to ensure their children have eternal access to the truth.
Wow. That completely changes the framing. It is profoundly humbling. And it creates a really natural transition, I think, because if getting the translation into these dialects requires that much risk, what actually happens to the communities who gather to read it once it's finished?
Right. That is the reality of the hidden church, because the legal and political landscape they are navigating just to have a Sunday worship service is something most of us can barely comprehend.
Yeah, and before we get into the specifics of that landscape, I want to be very clear with you, our listener. As we discuss these legal frameworks and the actions of the governments in Vietnam and Laos, we are strictly and impartially reporting the facts laid out in the weekly preview.
Exactly.
We are not taking any political sides here. Our goal is simply to convey the legal reality these believers are navigating on the ground so that you know exactly how to pray for them.
That context is so vital. The baseline reality is that Vietnam and Laos are officially communist states with comprehensive, highly structured oversight of all religious activity.
Which means, as we alluded to, foreign missionaries cannot just apply for a missionary visa.
No, not at all.
They have to serve under professional cover. They enter the country as English teachers, as business owners, or as development professionals. And I want us to pause and just think about the psychology of that for a second.
Yeah, it's tense.
That means you are raising your children in a constant culture of concealment. You have kids who have to be hyper-vigilant about what they say to their friends on the playground at school because, slipping up and mentioning a church meeting could get their parents deported, or worse, get their local friends arrested.
The psychological weight of living a dual identity like that is just exhausting. But for the indigenous church leaders, the exposure is even more direct, and the consequences are far more severe.
Right.
Let's look at Vietnam, for instance. They passed the 2018 law on belief in religion, which essentially requires all religious congregations to register under state-approved organizations.
And what happens if they don't?
Well, if you refuse, and it is primarily the ethnic minority house churches in the Central Highlands who refuse because they want to maintain biblical autonomy, you face a sustained, legalized campaign of harassment.
And just to define a term you might see in the weekly preview, a lot of these believers in the Central Highlands are referred to as montagnards.
Right.
That is a term left over from the French colonial era, meaning mountain dwellers. referring to these specific indigenous ethnic minority groups.
Exactly. And the oversight on these Montagnard groups is really tightening. Like in March 2025, the Vietnamese government created the Ministry of Ethnic and Religious Affairs.
Okay, and what does that mean practically?
Human rights observers have noted that this specific ministry has led to heightened, deeply coordinated state control over anyone who falls into both categories, ethnic minority and religious minority.
Wow. And the human cost of this system is just devastating. According to indigenous ministry leaders, there are currently over 100 pastors believed to be imprisoned in Vietnam right now.
Over 100.
100 pastors sitting in cells. We need to get specific here because it is way too easy to just hear a statistic and move on. Think about Pastor Wythen Nee. In May 2025, he was handed a 9-year prison sentence.
9 years.
His crime. The government labeled it undermining national solidarity under Article 116 of their criminal code. But in reality, he was just leading an unregistered church. 9 years for doing what you and I did freely last Sunday.
It's hard to fathom. Then there is Pastor Nguyen Mon Hung. He was sentenced to 6 years in 2025 under Article 117 for anti-state propaganda and the mechanism of his crime, an online social media post.
Are you kidding? 6 years for a post.
6 years. And the reach of the state is also crossing borders now. The weekly preview details the case of Wai Quin Bidap, a Montagnard Christian rights activist who had actually fled to Thailand.
Okay.
But in November 2025, he was extradited from Thailand back to Vietnam to face a justice system that had already convicted him in absentia.
It is relentless. I mean, in March 2026, at least 6 Christian leaders, including Pastor Wai Nai Wing, were summoned and detained. And just recently, in June 2026, Pastor Su Yui, who is 68 years old, and a 40-year-old church member named Su Doc were arrested in Jilai province on those exact same charges of undermining national unity.
But, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the government's attempt to crush this movement is actually revealing its strength.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. Despite all of this, the surveillance, the extradition, the heavy prison sentences, the church is still growing.
It is.
It makes me think of Matthew 10, verse 27, where Jesus commands his followers, "What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs." The state apparatus is trying with all its might to keep this in the dark, but the church refuses to stop whispering the truth.
Absolutely.
The pastors in prison are really only half the story. The true hidden heroes are the wives who are suddenly thrust into managing congregations entirely alone while their husbands serve 9-year sentences. It's the children growing up with their fathers in prison, carrying the generational weight of this hidden service.
It is incredible resilience, but it also reveals something crucial about the nature of the opposition. The government laws, the police raids, the prison sentences, that is only the visible symptom.
Right.
The root of the resistance is deeply spiritual.
So we see pastors being locked up. But the government isn't just operating in a vacuum. They have the public's backing, or at least their compliance, because of something much deeper. A cultural worldview that views Christianity as a literal threat to the region's DNA.
Yes.
And that brings us to the third pillar from the weekly preview. The 3 interlocking spiritual strongholds that reinforce one another.
And we really need to understand how these strongholds work together, because the church in Vietnam and Laos doesn't face just one line of opposition. The first of these 3 strongholds is Buddhist nationalism.
Okay, break that down for us.
So in Laos, for example, about 65% of the population practices Theravada Buddhism. But we need to define what that actually means on the ground. Theravada Buddhism in Laos isn't just like a private faith you practice on the weekends. Ethnic Lao identity and Buddhist practice are officially and culturally intertwined. The temple is the center of the village. If you don't participate, you aren't just seen as having different theological views. You are seen as a traitor to your village's harmony and prosperity.
Oh, wow. So becoming a Christian isn't just changing your mind about who God is. It is viewed as a literal act of cultural betrayal.
Exactly.
Christianity is framed as this foreign Western intrusion trying to erase what makes you Lao or what makes Vietnamese.
Exactly. And that cultural pressure is immediately locked into place by the second stronghold, which operates inside the home: ancestor veneration.
Oh, right.
This practice is present across virtually all ethnic communities in the region, participating in family rites, burning incense for the dead, and fulfilling obligations to deceased ancestors. It's expected as the most basic sign of family loyalty.
And the data on how deeply entrenched this is absolutely blew my mind. Like, The weekly preview highlights a June 2024 report from the Pew Research Center. Listen to this.
Yeah, it's wild.
86% of Vietnamese Christians still report burning incense for ancestors, and 81% report offering flowers or candles. Over 80% of people who identify as Christians.
Yeah.
I have to ask, how does that work mechanically? How do they justify that theologically? Are they just hedging their bets? Or is the cultural pressure so intense that they've redefined what burning incense actually means?
It is entirely about the pressure and how they define honor. For many, refusing to burn incense isn't just a polite disagreement about theology. In their cultural context, if you don't venerate your ancestors, you are effectively erasing your parents' existence in the afterlife.
Wow.
You are the ultimate bad son or daughter. So some Christians try to redefine the practice as simply honoring their parents to fulfill the fifth commandment just to survive the social consequences. Because the cost of total refusal is immediate family conflict, total social exclusion, and almost always the loss of your family inheritance. The community completely cuts you off.
Man. So you have the cultural resistance of Buddhist nationalism telling you that you don't belong in the country, and the intense family pressure of ancestor veneration telling you that you don't belong in your family.
Yep.
And then you have the third stronghold, communist atheism.
Yes. The ideological framework of communist atheism frames all religion as backwards superstition, right? And it specifically targets Christianity as a tool of Western imperialism designed to destabilize the state.
Right.
This is the mechanism that provides the political and legal justification for the surveillance and the arrests we just talked about.
Let's use an analogy to really picture how this functions. It's like an autoimmune response in a physical body.
Oh, I like that.
Buddhist nationalism acts as the body identifying Christianity as a foreign virus. It says, this doesn't belong in our DNA. Ancestor veneration acts as the white blood cells, the family unit, immediately attacking the virus to isolate it and cut it off from the rest of the body.
Yeah.
And communist atheism is the aggressive medical treatment, the government stepping in to forcefully eradicate it with laws and prisons.
That is a perfect way to visualize the mechanics of it. They operate as one cohesive defense system. And this is why praying against these strongholds is not a one-time passive event. It is a long, highly strategic, faithful campaign.
Yeah.
It perfectly mirrors the reality of Revelation 12, verse 11. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death.
So powerful.
These believers in the highlands are slowly dismantling that autoimmune defense system from the inside out, but they desperately need sustained, informed intercession from the global church to do it.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating an entire week to this.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to highlight a featured video resource for this week. It's from CBN News, and it's called Redemption. 45 years later, Vietnam War's Napalm Girl shares her journey to Christ.
It's an incredible story.
It really is. It is a powerful visual look at God's redeeming work in this specific part of the world, and you can find the link to watch it right in the weekly preview.
You will also find the daily devotionals in the app for week 30. They are designed to really align your heart with God's purpose before you even begin to pray.
Yeah.
These devotionals draw from texts like 2 Timothy 2, verse 9, Jeremiah 15, verse 16, John 15, verse 20, 1 Corinthians 2, verses 4 and 5, Ruth 1, verse 16, Psalm 57, verse 1, and Habakkuk 3, verses 17 and 18.
That's a lot of verses.
It is, but rather than having you try to memorize a list of chapters and verses right now, I want you to grasp the central unifying theme they all share. They speak directly to the reality of the unchained Word of God and how to find deep, unshakable joy even when surrounded by total opposition.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you? How do you actually participate? Well, the weekly preview gives us some very practical prayer challenges for this week. First, can you dedicate just 9 minutes a day to pray? That is exactly 3 minutes for each of the 3 strongholds we discussed.
Very doable.
Or, if you are driving or on the go, it is even easier. You can use the 5-minute pre-recorded daily prayer available right inside the app. Second, look up one of the imprisoned pastors we named today, like Pastor Wai Fin Ni or Pastor Nguyen Man Hung.
Yeah, don't let those names fade.
Exactly. Write their name down on a sticky note. Put it on your bathroom mirror or your car dashboard. Somewhere you will see it daily and pray specifically for their release. Third, share the immense challenge of the 15 dialect Bible translation with just one other person this week.
Just one person.
And finally, write a brief message of encouragement to a missionary or a pastor. Let them know the global church sees them, remembers them, and is actively fighting alongside them in prayer.
These aren't just, passive exercises to feel good about ourselves. This is the literal mechanism of how we participate in the Great Commission from wherever we are.
Become a missionary on your knees. Become a prayer missionary. You can start right now by downloading the web-based app. It is incredibly accessible and available in both English and Spanish. Just click the link in the description of this deep dive or visit assistingtoobey.com.
Awesome.
And while you are there, please invite others to follow Assisting to Obey on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube so we can continue building this global community of intercessors.
As we close out our time today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. We so often think of spiritual strongholds as something over there in restricted nations.
Right.
We look at the cultural immune system operating in Vietnam and Laos and we just marvel at it. But if cultural expectations, political ideologies, and deep family pressures can build such an interlocking fortress against the gospel in Southeast Asia, what invisible interlocking strongholds are quietly operating in your own neighborhood or even your own home right now?
So, you want a faith that actually matters, right? You want to make a difference in the world, to see the gospel changing lives, to know that your walk with God and His Word is impacting more than just your own life. Yeah, you want your life to count for the nations. But here's the thing. You're busy, maybe overwhelmed. You're pulled in 20 different directions. And even though you want to engage in missions and the Great Commission, you don't always know what to pray for, what's happening globally, or what your next step should be. The desire to obey is there, but the pathway isn't always clear. Let the Missions Connect app show you the way. Every day, you'll get a missions-focused devotional with a simple, practical action step and an option to share with the Missions Connect community. Every week, you get 3 strategic prayer focuses with fresh daily text and audio prayers, so you're never guessing about what to pray for. And when you're ready, you'll find opportunities to actually get involved in God's global work. Everything in the devotional and prayer section is free forever, but we offer you the opportunity to try the premium version for 15 days. You want to impact the nations with the gospel? With Missions Connect, now you can. Missions Connect, helping you bless the nations through prayer, knowledge, and obedience. A ministry of assistingtoobey.com.